In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, Mr. President, we would like to welcome your presidency of the Security Council during the current month of February. I also express my thanks to Mrs. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, and Mrs. Idem Wazarno, Director of Operations and Advocacy at OCHA, as well as Ms. Hala Al-Karib, Regional Director of the Strategic Initiative for Women in the Horn of Africa. I'd like to thank them all for their comprehensive briefings, and we would like to thank Ms. Hala for her strong briefing, which reflected the voice of the women in Sudan. Mr. President, the war of systemic aggression waged by regional and international forces is employing political activists allied with the Rapid Support Forces militia. This war has placed Sudan before a single choice, confronting an existential threat that is working like a plague to dismantle the Sudanese state. It's trying to eliminate the Sudanese armed forces through misleading and false narratives under the pretext of combating the Muslim Brotherhood, whose long rule was overthrown by the December 2019 revolution. Sudan today is engaged in a fierce war fought by its armed forces with significant support, backing, popular solidarity, and a uniquely resilient military steadfastness. The government of Sudan is now returning to Khartoum, engaging positively with AU, the UN, and regional organizations, resuming its activity within IGAD and communicating with the international community and the United States. We're also keen to launch an inclusive national dialogue with all political and social forces. We welcome all those who distance themselves from the alliance of aggressors and align with a national position. We look forward to an end to this war of aggression targeting our people, as well as the cessation of the unprecedented atrocities and violations committed by the rebel militia against civilians, including ethnic genocide. The government of Sudan presented its vision for ending the war to this esteemed council in December 2025 when it was addressed by the Prime Minister. The Government of Hope continues its effort to build and make peace based on national ownership and in partnership with relevant sectors, civil society, women and youth. It's developing confidence-building measures, recovery and national reconciliation with the aim of achieving the Sudanese Peace Initiative, ending the rebellion, establishing a political settlement, and securing sustainable peace. This would enable a successful transition, whose ultimate objective is the holding of elections and ensuring the democratic choice of the Sudanese people. We're also working to contain the effects of the escalation of the armed conflict and the threat it poses to the unity of the state and to the map of societal and communal peace. This track complements the political process, but it's preceded with higher security arrangements of the post-war period. This approach seeks to address the root causes of protracted conflicts, promote a culture of civic legality and peaceful coexistence, as well as establishing the principle of the rule of law and community justice. For these are frameworks for transitional justice. It also aims to contain rebellious tendencies, hold the cycle of violence and hate speech, while engaging social actors, including leaders of traditional administrations, religious and Sufi leaders, academics, women, youth, and girls in the project of peace building and peacemaking, according to the relevant Council resolution. This is in addition to voluntary return policies and reconstruction and rebuilding effort. We're trying to foster a Sudanese national identity reconciled with the realities of cultural and linguistic diversity. This is linked to building social peace and reforming the justice and security sectors in the post-war phase. And we're trying to do that through mobilizing support for ensuring the flow of humanitarian assistance, mobilizing support for the civilian protection plan, opposing efforts aimed at establishing a parallel administration and a separate government, and supporting the transition from relief to recovery and reconstruction. Turning to the United States position, it is highly developed compared to the positions of other mediators. It reflects a greater degree of seriousness. This follows the commitments made by President Trump after his meeting with His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia to end the war following the atrocities and ethnic genocide committed by the Rapid Support Forces militia. We support the U.S.-Saudi-Egyptian engagement aimed at ending the war following the clear commitment of President Trump and the repeated statements by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio regarding pressure on the militia and its sponsors to halt arms shipments. At the legislative level, successive condemnations have been issued by both the Senate and the House of Representatives, as well as by prominent members denouncing these atrocities, criminalizing them, calling for accountability, and demanding the designation of the militia as a terrorist organization, and openly accusing those who provide militia with weapons and military equipment. In this regard, we appreciate the statements made by U.S. Secretary of State Rubio on the 12th of November 2025, in which he unequivocally condemned the RSF militia and rejected its narrative, affirming that the abuses and atrocities committed are at the hands of rogue elements. He further affirmed his support for the call by Congress to designate the militia as a terrorist organization, if doing so would contribute to ending the war. Accordingly, we value the Saudi-US-Egyptian initiative and seek to strengthen it until it achieves its objectives. We also follow and commend the effort of Mr. Mossad Boulos, who has remained in contact with the country's senior leadership. We call for practical steps, as referenced by Secretary Rubio, to cut off the flow of weapons and support received by the Rapid Support Forces militia. He noted in his statement that the designation of the militia could be considered if it would lead to ending the war. Sudan's channels will remain open at the highest levels regarding the implications and parameters of the Saudi-US-Egyptian initiatives. This is with the aim of halting external military interference, ensuring the uninterrupted delivery of humanitarian relief. And we have clarified to your council before that there are cross-border points and airports provided by the government of Sudan, and Mr. Tom Fletcher commended those efforts. Therefore, we support the uninterrupted delivery of humanitarian relief. We support the protection of civilians from the militia's domination. And we call for the respect of international humanitarian law and international law. We hope that the United States will leverage its influence to ensure an effective mediation whose outcome strengthens the cessation of the war and repositions Sudanese-American relations within a new strategic partnership. It will be another achievement for President Donald Trump, who attaches great importance to the matter. Sudan remains committed to constructive engagement with the U.S. for peace. We call for bringing pressure to bear on the regional sponsors so that they can cease supplying the militia with military equipment. Ending external military interference must precede any other step. It is the key to stopping the war and to enhancing civilian protection. I would also like to thank Mr. Mossad Boulos, advisor to President Donald Trump for African and Arab affairs, for his endeavors and his relations with the Sudanese leadership and his effort to achieve peace and end the war in Sudan, as well as the donor humanitarian event on Sudan hosted by Washington on Tuesday, the 3rd of February. We also thank the U.S. for its pledge of a contribution of $200 million in support of Sudan's 2026 humanitarian needs and response plan. We also thank the states that have continued to support humanitarian work and relief effort in Sudan through bilateral or multilateral contributions. We thank Britain for their comprehensive statement today and their support to the women of Sudan, especially their contribution and commitment to end the war. We commend their positive stance since Mr. Cooper has assumed the position of Prime Minister, Mrs. Yvette Cooper, that is, in 2025, and the contribution of more than 146 million British pounds for the Sudan Humanitarian Fund. Turning to the food situation, Mr. President, since 2022, which witnessed the last field survey report based on scientific data collection and analysis, all subsequent reports issued during the war of aggression have amounted to assumptions lacking scientific accuracy, given the difficulty of obtaining information from affected populations across the various states of Sudan under siege by the Rapid Support Forces. Sudanese civilians are not dying from famine in the scientific sense. Rather, they are dying due to the militia's intransigence, as it kills them in cold blood, employing systemic starvation and siege, as was stated in the Human Rights Council report recently issued. For it noted that the systemic use of starvation and siege is the main reason for the killing of civilians. This is a flagrant violation of Security Council Resolution 2417 and of Article 54 of the Additional Protocol of the Geneva Conventions. States neighboring Sudan that are aligned with the militia support this criminal approach in pursuit of a political agenda aimed at displacing civilians and transferring nomadic groups and perpetrators from the Sahel states to replace them. Sudan possesses the capabilities and resources that have enabled it to maintain food production during the war. This is confirmed by humanitarian organizations operating in Sudan, which procured from Sudan the largest share purchased in the region of food crops, such as sorghum, according to the testimony of the WFP in a meeting with member states at the end of the last war. The IPC has come to publish new reports periodically based on previous data and unsubstantiated projections without coordination with the Ministry of Agriculture in a manner that has altered its technical character. We have also tried to open corridors and border crossings during the war, such as the Adri crossing. The government has worked to increase emergency funding for food, health and water programs, while expanding coverage of programs for the treatment of acute malnutrition among children and women through partnerships with friendly states and international organizations. We've also delivered full food rations through airdrops and through popular community effort in host local communities, such as the city of El-Dabba in the northern state, including the experience of community kitchens. We've also strengthened cash transfer programs in safe areas and supported remittances from Sudanese abroad and supported investment in restoring supply chains and local markets. The ultimate solution lies in ending the war and protecting civilians. This cannot be achieved without bringing pressure to bear on the militia's regional sponsors to cease arming them, to stop attacks and assaults against civilians and civilian infrastructure. Mr. President, we welcome the efforts of the Secretary General in the form of Mr. Al-Mamra and his good offices in support of efforts to resolve disputes, promote reconciliation, build confidence among the parties, facilitating negotiations, and reaching humanitarian ceasefire. That's in addition to the implementation of the Jeddah Declaration and the informal technical dialogue discussions. Sudan accepted the humanitarian truces requested by the Secretary General. However, they were rejected by the militia. Cooperation with the Secretary General's effort continue. We have facilitated between those and those of the U.S. while upholding international law and international humanitarian law. We're also enhancing civilian protection. We hope that the national plan that was submitted to the Council on the 23rd of January to protect civilians would be taken into consideration. We need to follow up on the humanitarian concerns that have intensified after the militia's occupation of the city of Al-Fasher. We look forward to the activation of Resolution 1591 concerning the arms embargo on Darfur, as regional sponsors have continued to smuggle weapons to the militia, targeting Sudan's territorial integrity and sovereignty, seeking to dismantle the state so that it becomes a prize for nomads, perpetrators and foreign mercenaries, and to impose UN sanctions upon them. Sudan will reject any expansion of the scope of Resolution 1591 and any arms embargo imposed on the Sudanese armed forces. We believe this would be a support to the militias. We believe shortcomings can be addressed by revitalizing the Jeddah Declaration, which contains commitments that can be built upon. We also stress that the government of Sudan supports and coordinates with those experts on human rights, especially with the latest visit by the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the visit of His Excellency Mr. Volker to Sudan. Led to the meeting of more than 140 victims. It demonstrated that the testimonies regarding events in Darfur confirmed the occurrence of mass killings and summary executions, including of non-combatant civilians, prisoners, and those leaving the city in search of safety. The testimonies also included rape and sexual violence, torture, harsh treatment, arbitrary detention, enforced disappearance, abduction of civilians for ransom, attacks on medical service centers, mass killing of the University of Al-Fasher, and targeting on the basis of ethnic and racial identity or based on imagined racial profiling of the victim. This leads us to ensure that we will cooperate fully with all efforts to end the war, as well as with independent legal investigative mechanisms such as the ICC and Human Rights Rapporteur. Therefore, we require a firm position aimed at the following: call upon the Council and the international community to take firm measures and impose UN sanctions on the militia and its leadership. For this only prolongates the war and the suffering. We have to put an end to the efforts of the militia and the foreign mercenary advocates. We have to persuade the regional sponsor to cease supplying the rebel militia with weapons and advanced drones. We have to stop the recruitment of foreign mercenaries from any country. We need to take punitive action against perpetrators. We have to support the voluntary return of refugees and the IDPs. We should support Sudan's peace initiative, which calls for civilian protection, and designate the militia as a terrorist group based on the genocide committed in Al-Fashir, and condemn parties that continue to introduce weapons, supplies, drones, and to deploy mercenaries and foreign fighters despite claiming support for a political solution, thereby prolonging the war. Thank you, Mr. President.